You.
Kind introduction and a very warm welcome to Professor Neuberger.
Thank
It's
you.
an honor and pleasure to have you with us today. And many congratulations on
Thank you.
the recent prize. And there's another recent celebration that 2020 brought, namely, it is the 10th anniversary of a wonderfully rich and influential public history platform, which was created under your leadership and which you steered as the founding editor over the last 10 years. This platform is called Not Even Past, after William Faulkner's famous much loved dictum, of course, about the past being far from dead. And I would start there. Could you tell us a little bit about the platform, how it came to be, and what it's all about?
Sure. So Not Even Past is a public history website. And our goal has always been to make academic history, scholarly history, available and accessible to the public. And that's what we do. So we have articles on all sorts of topics from around the world and from every chronological period. We have book reviews, again, as broad a scope as we possibly can. We have articles about historical films and digital history. And we also have a podcast called 15-Minute History, which is associated with the website. Yeah, we have, hundreds and hundreds of articles now after 10 years of publishing.
And well, this has been a particularly turbulent decade. It feels a lot has changed over those 10 years. We've talked about politics of inevitability moving into politics of eternity, and regimes popping up that have their own ways of doing away with history. And it seems even people's behavior online has changed the way we read and trust sources. So my question to you would be, have you observed changes in how the platform has sort of responded to what's going on? Have there been changes in your audience, or the emphasis of the contributions, or just have you observed changes to the role of the platform over these 10 years since you started, and now that we're celebrating the 10th anniversary?
Well, I guess I'd say that I think the goal has been the same from the beginning, and that's really just making high quality, serious history available to the public. In terms of topics, we've changed a bit over time. I'd say in the last year or two, the issues of race and of the trustworthiness of the news are kind of the big topics that really are important. But we've been committed to expanding the way history teaches about race from the very beginning, and also I'd say that we've been committed to a very high standard of historical writing, so that all of our articles have the same standards as scholars have for making clear arguments based on verifiable evidence, which is what we want the news to be also, right? So in a way, I feel that we teach about those subjects pretty consistently. We've been, in terms of newer topics, we've given more attention to public history as a field, and we started a series of articles about public history itself a few years ago now. And actually, Jimena Perry, our host, is one of the big contributors to that, because she writes about memory and public history in local museums in Colombia. She has some wonderful articles about that on the website, and things like post-custodial archiving, where we use digital technology to leave materials in the local places where we used to just Americans used to just take them and bring them home and put them in our museums, right? We now do what we can to make digital copies so that things are preservable in the places where they were created, where documents were created, but then we can use the digital copies to share them more widely. So things like that. We've been more interested in talking about public history as a field, as a topic, as something that people are interested in doing. Yeah, and also digital history generally. We have a new series starting a couple of years ago on writing reviews of digital history websites, other historical websites, and archives and things like that. So we're committed to making more people aware of the kinds of history that are available to the public, other than scholarly history.
Thank you. Over to you, Guilherme.
Yeah, well, I think that many people that will be watching us today or we will watch the recorded event are newcomers to this public history field. Mm-hmm. And I would like to ask you, Joan, how would you introduce public history to non-academic audiences or to a student that don't know what it is? How would you do this introductory talking?
Mm-hmm. What is public history? What is public? Well, really, I would say the way that we defined our mission at Not Even Past is pretty much the way I define what public history is. That is, it's different from some kinds of popular history in the sense that we are totally against the concept of watering down what we do, but making history accessible and available to as many people as possible, but but while at the same time keeping the same standards that we have for scholarly history. I'd say not even past is a particular kind of public history in the sense that it is material that we bring to the public. So it's unilateral in that sense. And a lot of public history is much more collaborative. So scholars, historians, working with other kinds of historians, people who are already doing public history in local museums or in local archives or in documentary filmmaking. A lot of public historians are doing more collaborative sort of joint projects, which I think is a really fantastic direction to go in.
Yeah. So
am I leaving anything out in terms of what public history is? What do you think?
No, I think that was good. I think that was a good answer, and it kind of go with something I wanted to ask you too, because nowadays we are more connected than always, and all this connection and social media and internet. Do you think this is it's a good way to engage with non-academic audiences, and maybe in general, in society in general, like Mari said in her question, do you see more benefits or hazards in these platforms like social medias, to engage public?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the internet has made public history the expansion of public history possible. There's so much more that we can do to reach people. And there's so much more that historians can do using digitized archives, especially this year when historians couldn't travel or when people couldn't travel around and go to history museums. There's so much available online now that I think that in itself is really a benefit. In terms of social media, generally, there are, of course, so many problems with being able to make sure that what we see online is trustworthy. So of course, it's really important. And I think most, elementary schools now teach students how to judge what they see online. And then, of course, there are huge communities of toxic one thing or another that are dangerous. But in general, I think that for people who are interested in history, the internet has been just a huge benefit.
Okay. Thank you. So, Mari, I think you can go right now. Yeah. It's our turn.
Yeah. So I would like to know, how do you see what, in your opinion, or is there a kind of a learning curve involved in presenting material to the public as a historian? So, is it a leap for discipline such as history to be taken from its academic setting and presented to the wider public? I mean, different disciplines have different struggles there. I know there's debates in philosophy how to do it, and editors struggle to kind of to create this match between the very technical sort of structure, the way the ideas are built, and then to how to actually communicate that to an audience in an engaging way. So how would you say this is? What would you say is the case in the historical discipline, or is there even a difference between? I mean, do you see the public as a different audience than the trained historian?
Well, I think in many cases it is a different audience, in the sense that I'm a big supporter of scholarly books. I think that we should be continually writing scholarship, even if very few people read it, because those are the laboratories in which professional historians work. We don't complain when chemists publish articles about fundamental, objects. We don't complain if we can't understand them, and I think that should be the same for scholarly history as well. But history has the benefit of being a story in many cases, and so that's one of the things that I think makes it more accessible to people, and maybe easier for professional historians to learn how to write for the public. But I also believe that there's nothing so complicated in social life or historical life that can't be explained clearly. And difficult texts are often difficult because they're badly written, or they have terrible, or they needed an editor. And I think that all historians can learn to write for the public. And also, I think a lot more of our students are coming in with experience writing blogs, or having some experience in their classes earlier, before they come as grad students, where they have some experience writing for the public. So yeah, it's a different kind of writing. We encourage people to use simpler sentence structures and things like that. But I also believe, one of the things that I've learned over the last 10 years is that teaching graduate students how to write for the public makes them better scholarly writers. They express their ideas more clearly, they organize their work more effectively. And so it's been a kind of, wonderful sort of circular experience.
Yeah, interesting. But generally in writing history for the public, or any discipline for that matter for the public, do you see a tension between, let's say, accommodating the habits of the public, what people are what they wish and are willing to read about, and then the perhaps the mission of wanting to raise certain issues and perhaps educate, for the lack of a better term?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I mean, it's hard to there are plenty of people who are not interested in reading history. So one of the questions that we perennially talk about when we're, thinking about Not Even Past, is how we can reach more people and how we can get more people interested in history. And that's really, that's hard. But I guess I don't see it as my mission to speak to everybody out there. If that, I think, would be a huge challenge. Journalists are told to write at an 8th grade level. And I think that is, we have higher standards than that, but I think that, yeah, I think that would be is that what you're asking? How can we, there are people who are not interested in this kind of work. And I struggled with trying to really reach out to people who were of a broad political spectrum and of a broad, interest base. And I think we've made some progress in doing that, but I would say that that is pretty much an impossibility, honestly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, Joan,
Is that too
I'd like to
defeatist?
ask
Should
you.
we not be that defeatist? I don't know.
Well, I'd like to ask you, Joan. You said it before in the beginning of the conversation, and one of the things that the critics, people who criticize public history, most say is that this accuracy is lost, this rigor is lost when you try to produce something academic that is trying to reach a non-academic audience. So, do you constantly think about that? You take this issue in consideration in your work?
Yeah, I mean that was one of the main things that we thought about at the beginning, and I make a clear distinction between public history and popular history. I think and it's not a judgment. I just think there are different ways of reaching the public. And
It's like a first step to understand it, right? You put it. It's like a different kind of history. It's a public history way of doing things. Is it?
yeah, I mean, I think certain kinds of public history are really trying to reach the audience that Mari was asking about. A much broader audience where ideas are really simplified, and that at least was not my mission, right? My mission was really to reach people who are interested in understanding what scholars do, and at the same time having access to the best of recent history that we're doing, but maintaining the same standards of evidence and some kind of standard of complexity, right? Some understanding that if you're going to understand what history is about, that it's complex, and there are always going to be people who disagree with each other about what happened, or what various events mean, and that's a good thing. That's what we should be encouraging. But I have no problem with people who do other kinds of history, but it's not what I do. So I'm not. I mean, to answer your question, I don't see a problem here really. I see a huge range of the kinds of things that people who want to get history out to the public can do.
Okay. And John, I don't know how it's inside your context, but is public history, your experience with public history was very well received or wasn't? How that was that experience for you?
Do you mean, so you mean within the academy, within the university?
Yeah,
Is that what you mean? Yeah, I mean, at first, even people in my department were very skeptical. Not everybody, but there were some skeptical people, and there are plenty of people who are professional historians who are skeptical of public history as a field and as an activity. But I think I think everyone's pretty much recognized that this is a really valuable thing to do. At the same time, I think a lot of scholars really want to reach a broader audience, but didn't know how. And so Not Even Past gave people a platform for being able to reach a broader audience. And, all of my colleagues have really appreciated that. At first, there was some skepticism about teaching graduate students to write for the public. That's actually been the most satisfying part of this job. I've gotten to work with grad students far outside my field. I've gotten to learn things about all different, areas. And for the grad students, it's been a huge benefit to have. It's actually been a kind of writing workshop for them. So we really just working on writing for the public has been a way of giving grad students a way of thinking about writing and working on their writing and becoming better writers. And I think that's really, that was a challenge at first too. A lot of people thought academic writing and writing for the public have to be very different. But I think we showed that they don't have to be very different and that they feed each other. So, yeah, and I mean, I would say that that's one of the biggest changes over the last 10 years. Really, the first question that you're asking is that public history is much more accepted. A lot more scholars are writing op-eds for newspapers, that kind of thing. and a lot more professional historians, scholarly historians are interested in producing history for the public and see it as a valuable tool in a way that was not really true 10 years ago, that people were very skeptical of. Yeah, I think that's one thing that's really changed.
Yeah, it's good to hear that because I kind of feel this in Brazil too, that public history is very different. I mean, I wasn't here 10 years ago studying about it, but now I am. And what I can see is that more people are joining it and, trying to understand and produce things.
Mhm.
So thank you, Mari. You can go now.
Yeah, so perhaps we can talk about some of the subjects covered on not even past. So I know that you've paid particular attention to shedding light on perhaps poorly taught or misrepresented topics. I saw in one of your interviews you talked about, for example, the history of slavery being one such thing where there might be gaps or issues in school curricula, and your work in Not Even Past has sort of stepped in there to fill those gaps. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Right around the beginning of, so 10 years ago, Texas has a statewide board that decides what textbooks we use. And also they decide the standards in schools. So they have a list of things that they want to be taught. And one of the things that was going to be on the list and was thankfully taken off was to teach the so-called good sides of slavery, which I just found incredibly offensive and discouraging. So one of my goals from the beginning was to offer, as he said, was to offer as much of the history of slavery and of African American history as we possibly could. And we're very lucky because we have we have wonderful African American historians in the history department at UT Austin, and graduate students working in the area, and documents in our local archives. So that was pretty easy to do. And that was also one of the motivations for starting the podcast, 15-Minute History. And there I worked with one of our grad students who had done a lot of public history before, Christopher Rose. Chris has finished his dissertation, so neither of us are actually working on 15-Minute History anymore. But it was really his project, and I worked on it with him. But we were both disturbed about the way African American history, Mexican American history, and also the history of Islam, which is his field. He's a Middle Eastern historian. And he has his own blog now, actually, ChristopherSRose.com, I think, org or com. That's really wonderful. He's a wonderful public historian, and he made 15-Minute History what it is. So in both of these projects, we were really looking to give not just the everyday public, anyone interested in history, but to give teachers and students articles and documents that they could use in their teaching or in their learning. So to supplement what was being taught in schools. So yeah, that was a big part of one of our goals when we started it off. And I think we've done a pretty good job with that. So.
Yeah, I really like the podcast. I was just recently listening to on the Spanish flu, and very timely, of course, and very yeah. It was wonderful to the way it also, among all these other insights, addressed the false analogy involved in attempts to connect our current virus to
yeah.
So
yeah.
And Guilherme, do you have a question?
Well, you were talking about the podcast, and I would like to understand your vision, Joan. What do you think about podcasts in general as a platform? We have now a huge kind of a boom of podcasts all over the world, and of course there's a lot of quantity, but maybe not so much quality. And also there's a lot of quality ones too. But the thing is, how do you see that podcasts as a platform, and how would you say that the podcast, like I said, 15-minute history, how do you think that it contributes to position public history as a field?
Well, first of all, I love podcasts. I like everything connected with this. I didn't know much about them when we started 15-minute history, but there's a huge range of history podcasts. Everything from 4-hour long lectures to our 15-minute long interviews or series. I mean, there's just a huge range of history podcasts. There's really something for everyone. And I love listening to podcasts. I think they're a great platform for conveying history to the public in whatever form people want. Some podcasts have millions and millions of subscribers, and ours has been incredibly successful too. So I think that shows what kind of range there is in people's taste for public history, and that's something really all of us should keep in mind, because we're all, I don't know, I think we're all probably really good at one or two things, but maybe not good at everything. So we don't have to try and do everything. We just need to try and find a niche kind of history that we want to convey. But podcasts are so great because
Yeah.
it costs nothing. You can do it. Well, it doesn't cost nothing, but you can make them on your phone and put them online, and they can be valuable. So I think podcasts are a great way of conveying history, and I'm addicted to them myself. So, did we lose you?
No, hey, listen, we can go now, Mary.
Should we go to the questions from the public? Do you agree with that?
Sure, whatever you want. Yeah.
There's a question that comes from Malena Bedoya. Malena is a Ecuadorian historian. She actually was one of the people who did the first edition of the Explorers in this format, and she wants to know, Joan, if you can. She's working currently about public history and ethics. She's starting like a new project in Ecuadorian museums about this topic, and she wants to know if you could recommend her readings or tell her to take into account certain things to talk about ethics and public history.
Mm-hmm. So I can't actually think of anything right off the bat, but I'd like to say that we have a wonderful organization called the National Council for Public History. I don't know how connected you are with that, but it is the U.S. national, it's an American organization, and they have a website, ncph.org, National Council for Public History, that has bibliographies on every topic. And we also have the Digital History Library of America. That's not what it's called. It's Digital Humanities Library, Digital Library of America, that also has subject categories for readings like that. It's a great topic, though. I'm really glad that you're working on it.
Yeah. Thank you. Guilherme, back to you. Do you have a question?
Oh no, I was most trying to no, you can keep going if you have more questions.
Well, I have actually. I'm sorry, my video was off and I didn't realize that. I have actually one comment and one question. One comment is that you really lift a weight I have on my shoulders when you said that you don't have to try to please everybody and just find a niche when you're doing what you do. Okay, yeah, because sometimes when doing public history or talking about museums or curation, you feel like you need to please everybody, that everybody needs to like what you do. And you saying that makes me realize that no, you don't. And that's really good for doing what you do and doing it well.
Yeah, I don't think you could please everybody anyway. So
yeah,
it's probably, I think you should try and reach as many people as you can, but I don't think that you need to do everything.
Yeah, that's good.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
And my question is more like a personal thing I have been thinking about lately. As Joan mentioned, I worked with community museums and violence, how they represent violence. And I was in a conversation like 10 days ago about these kinds of museums in Colombia where the violence has become even more strong and coming back and everything is bad again. And I was thinking these museums need to go further. I mean, they can't only be okay with showing what's happening. They need to engage in more things. But then I think where is the line between that and becoming an activist? Or if those things are incompatible, or if you can do both. Since I was trained at UT Austin as a historian, I know that sometimes those lines are not very well defined, but some professors told me once, you're a scholar, not an activist. So I don't know where to draw that line there. Can you tell me something about that?
Well, first of all, well, that's actually a lot of really, really good questions. I think there are limits to what we can do. If you look at history, we can't stop all violence, right? But I think that the one thing that we can do is work locally. And the thing that was so powerful about your museums is the way that the people who put together those displays were really, really straddled the line between activism and I don't see any problem with that. I don't see a line between being a scholar and being an activist. It's not a problem for me. It is a bit of a problem for the state of Texas, perhaps, which prohibits that we engage in political activity. But using, while we're teaching, for example. But when you're working when you're working on your own, activism is something that I think we need to be doing.
Okay.
But but I don't mean to be flippant about it or an easy thing to do. I think the question of how to use history or the connections we have with people doing public history, how to use those platforms for good or for political purposes is tricky. And I can't really talk about your situation, but I think you probably know what the problems are, right? You know that you can only go so far. But I guess I would just encourage you not to feel that somehow activism is outside of our right somehow.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? I mean,
yes. No,
there's not so much that we can do, right? I mean, you can't.
Yeah, I know.
You can't stop the war, but you can help people think about it and process the issues that are going on.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and it also helps a lot because I was thinking that also in practice, like teaching public history, how do you approach that? How do you tell a public historian actually where the line is? And you just answered that, like, we know our problem, so we know. But there's also, I feel that there's also like a line that if you go too far into activism, you are losing also any kind of objectivity, and you just get too much into.
Well, I don't believe in objectivity, so.
Well, yeah. I mean, I mean, I'm thinking about people like are very passionate and they go too much far into one line, so maybe they lose what history is actually all about. I don't know. Those are things I'm thinking. I'm thinking they're going through my mind. Yeah, but.
So it sounds like you actually have a sense of where the line is, right? You have a sense of people who go too far, right?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
I don't believe that there is some kind of objective truth or like transparent, transparent clear truth to any situation. And so I think we need to be transparent about what our biases are and what our goals are. But I think our job is to raise questions and to help people think about the past, rather than telling people what to think. So we provide information and we provide evidence. We provide documentary evidence of, what we think is important that happened. But our goal is really to encourage people to think about their own surroundings, their own history, and connecting the history to the present. But again, I don't think that's mandatory, right? I mean, I also sort of support doing history for history's sake, thinking about the past for the past.
Thank you. Thank you.
Those are very, very hard questions. So thank you.
Yes. No, they're just things that I don't think there's an answer for that. It's just something to think about.
Well, you asked how I teach. When I teach, how I deal with political issues, and I'm trying to think. I've taught the seminar on public history 3 times, I think, and I haven't explicitly dealt with sort of radical points of view from one side or the other. But now that you've mentioned this, I realize I really need to do that somehow.
Thank you. Guilherme or Marie?
Well, I wanted to go back to what I've said before. One of my questions was about social media and the internet. And I wanted to bring it right now to the moment where we are right now in 2020. And do you think that the social distancing that we're facing due to the pandemic, is it affecting the way that public history is done? I mean, you think for me, it's kind of a paradox, because we are using more now the virtual space, more internet, and more social media, but we are, because of the social distancing, we can, like you said before, we can travel and we are not doing, ordinary things that historians do. So do you think that right now that we are entering a new decade, you think that big changes are coming to the public history field, to the way that public history is practiced?
I think that online public history, digital public history is only going to expand. It's such a good platform. Things like Not Even Past, blogs, podcasts, collaborative projects. Zoom has just proven to be both really frustrating and really helpful in lots of ways. So yeah, I mean, I guess I think online communities, I wouldn't say social media necessarily, but online communities are likely to expand. I suspect that travel is going to be difficult for a long time, so that the digitization of documents, which is important, problematic in some ways, but important, is going to probably play more of a role in teaching as well as in doing research. And I think that's mostly a good thing. So in that sense, I think it's likely that public history, that the sources for public history, that the resources for public history will probably expand, and also maybe an interest in history too, as people just become so used to being online and doing the kinds of things that we're doing right now, talking to each other from 4 different countries, or 4 different places. But I want to be really careful about making predictions, because I think we really don't have any idea what the end of this pandemic is going to look like. The financial costs are really just beginning to be felt by people. And I think we have no idea how the economic problems post-pandemic, if there ever is really post-pandemic, are gonna play out. It's going to be so I'm particularly feeling like I have no idea what is going to happen. Of course, we have a big election coming up that should affect things too.
Hard times.
And I think our biggest problem really is not the past, but the future. So climate change is something that we don't deal with enough anywhere. And I think that if we can use online platforms to try and change people's minds about what they think about the environment, that would be a good thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sort of temperamentally an optimist about things, but not very optimistic this month.
Yeah, we need to be optimistic, right?
Right.
Okay. Mari?
Well, talking about the future, what are your hopes and dreams for the future of Not Even Past? What do you think this platform could where could it go, apart from, of course, continuing to do the wonderful things it's already been doing? But do you have a vision for where it's going in the future, or yeah, if it
Well,
might, yeah, incorporate something that you haven't done so far?
So I stepped down as editor in September, and we are incredibly fortunate to have a fantastic new editor in Adam Clulow, who has just done an amazing job, even just over the summer, with new ideas about using video and interviews and connecting with the institute that we have on campus in the history department. So he has a lot of great ideas about what to do. 15-minute history was kind of in a little bit of a lull over the last year, and they are reviving 15-minute history. But I'm very much hands off. Like it's his platform now. It's his website now, to do with it what he wants. I'm here to help him in any way I can. But you need to talk to him. That would be a great conversation too, because he has done a lot of public history and is just, I think, going to do a great job with Not Even Past with 15-minute history. But I really feel like my job is to move on and let someone else do what they want. So I'm hoping to do. I'm on leave this year, but when I come back, I'm hoping to do some smaller projects, and in particular, some local projects. I have some ideas about working with the local archives to do more signage and history markers, things like that. But I haven't even begun to do that. Those are just ideas in my head right now.
I have another question. If the public doesn't have any other, can I go ahead and?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
apparently I can. Yeah, it's also, I mean, Joanne, these are just things that I have been thinking about of the
Sure.
practice for public history. Next semester, I'm going to start teaching an oral history class, which I'm very excited about.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about also related to the question Malena Bedoya made before about ethics. I was thinking about when to know when to stop asking. If you're dealing with victims of violence, for instance, there's so much you can ask. If there's also a line that you cross, you would be,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you will be insulting or offending that person too much. So when to know when to turn off the camera, when to stop recording, when to back off. Do you have like some kind of advice for that?
Well, I think that's a really important topic for public historians, doing interviews and things like that, especially in regions like yours, and dealing with topics like yours. But this is not a subject that I have any expertise in at all. I intentionally don't deal with living people. But there's a huge literature. There is a literature on the ethics that Malena asked about, and on doing oral histories that I'm just not an expert in. Sorry.
Okay. No. Okay.
But
Okay.
I think that it would be great if you did something like what we're doing with people who do oral histories, or who do public history and ethics. These are great topics for your project here.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
And also for ours. I don't know. That's a really good topic. Those are good topics.
Yes, I think
Sorry,
also
I can't be more helpful.
No, it's fine. I think they're also very, very timely because of how Guilherme and Marie were talking about how the world is going, and there's so much opinions. People are so polarized, so maybe also maybe we can put together something like that in the future. So back to you, to the moderators.
Guilherme?
Well, I would like to ask you, Joan, about some articles I've seen in Not Even Past, and you kind of spoke about it earlier. And I read one, I remember one that was talking about the London Calling. It was the Clash album, and it is a very political album, music history, and I think it was a very, very good text because it brought the background, political background, and what people generally don't know when they're listening or something they're consuming. And
Mhm.
I think that maybe this is one of the most important things that we can do in public history, to get something that is always in the face of the public, something that is in the media, or something that already is historic, like this album, as we can say, and try to speak about the social things about behind it, and the ideas about it. What do you think about things like that? We have a lot of articles like that in Not Even Past.
Yeah, no, and I love Eddie Watson's article on the Clash. He's also written, I think he did a 15-minute history podcast with about the Beatles. I mean, he works on popular music. And it's a great way to get people who might not know that they're interested in history to be interested in history. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great approach to trying to help people understand that everything has a history, right? And that whether it's political or not, but just to help people understand. I mean, it's a great teaching tool too. We also have an article on a mixtape that a couple of students put together for their American history class, of all the music that they used in class. They always played music at the beginning of each class, and I think it's a great way to get people interested in, because they already like the music, right? To find out that there's a history that they didn't really know about. Right.
Yeah,
I think I love those. I love those pieces. I love them all.
Yeah, there are so much things we can talk about it. I don't know. We have a lot of superhero movies and TV shows and all this stuff pumping up on people's face, and there's a background on why did the artist, why did he wrote like that, how did that character came up with, and I believe I agree with you. It's a great way to engage people that are not into the history field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What other articles did you guys like? Did you pick out? Did you notice that you particularly liked or maybe didn't like?
Well, I love this one. Like I said, was called "London is Drowning and I Live by the River." This is the chorus of the music now, right? And it was written by Edward Watson. And like I told you, I think it was awesome the way that he spoke about the moments that the band was going on. They just signed with a label for another record, so they were like a punk band, and now they're going for big. This is going to be a big release, London Calling, and it really was. So I think it's very, very awesome the way that he brought it to us. Mari, I don't know if you read any.
Yeah, good. What else?
Jimena, what about you? Oh, I think you're muted, Jimena.
I'm so sorry. That happens to me all the time.
I'll do it.
I have another question. You mentioned before that you have taught a seminar on public history 3 times now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that one of the exercises you made the students do was to create a blog.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the seminar, I was in the public listening to their presentations and stuff,
Okay.
and I thought it was great. But I want to ask you, did you have like any particular challenges teaching those students how to write for the blog and making that public history instead of like a conventional paper?
Yeah, there were some challenges. So I taught it 2 different ways. The first time we had one collective topic, which was the tower shooting when some Charles Whitman went up to the top of the tower at UT Austin and for 96 minutes just, randomly shot people on the ground. And that had not had a historical treatment. So the class chose topics that were related to that, and they each wrote a series of blogs. And then we have a website called Behind the Tower, that collected everything that we did in that class. But the problem with that class is that it was all U.S. history, and that was not really a problem for us. We all came to that topic without any expertise. So we're all starting from the same place, which was very interesting for me as a professor, and I think really helpful and interesting for everybody in the class. But I also discovered that a lot of people didn't want to take the class because they wanted to do something in their own fields. So the next time I taught it, I organized it around everyone picking their own topic, and hopefully picking a topic that was, a piece of what they thought their dissertation research might be on, so that it would be useful for them. And then we looked at, and then everyone had to choose some undigitized documents on campus at we have a number of archives at our campus. They had to choose documents that they would arrange to have digitized, and then they would write about them. And they also had to write lesson plans of how to use their documents and their blogs. That was also really fun, and I think everyone got a lot out of it. The main challenges were that some people even didn't really want to write blogs, even though that was the main assignment. So there was a little bit of resistance to that, but I think learning how to actually teach people to write for the public was harder than I thought it might be. So in the past, as editor of Not Even Past, I would just edit people's work and talk to them about it and talk about what they could do better. But in this class, I had to come up with sort of guidelines for how to write for the public. That was really useful exercise for me, and I think really helped the students. But I hadn't quite realized what that would be like. But we also have a website called the Public Archive, where the students' projects are posted, that you can find through Not Even Past. I think it's still up there, and you can see the kind of work that they did. But did that answer your question? I'm not sure I got at the challenges that you were asking about. I mean, I think it was a really fun class to teach because, again, I learned a lot, and we worked with archivists, we worked with other writers. Students had to study at blogs and come up with their own reasons for what made a blog successful, what made public history writing successful, and what kinds of things they thought could be improved and what things that they read online. So that was really, that's the best way to learn, I think, anyway, is to think, to be critical, to read things critically and then figure out how you can do things better. So
yes, it answers it a lot, because for some people, including me, writing well is very difficult.
Yeah, it is for everybody.
And then learning to write for a special public history outlet is even more difficult. Sometimes it's more difficult to write short and brief than a whole dissertation. So that's what I was asking, if there were some people that
absolutely. I think you can write bad history. You can write a dissertation with a kind of, you can just throw words together and no one's going to stop you. But learning how to write really clear sentences is what writing is all about. No matter what you write, no matter who you're writing for, no matter who your audience is, learning how to express your ideas clearly to any audience is, I think, something that we're all supposed to be doing. So, one of the things I do is look at people's writing. And one of the things we did in this class is look at some of the sort of lazy habits that we all have, using words that don't really say anything, using sentences that don't really say anything, using 3 sentences to say the same thing. We all do this. I'm editing a book now, and we all do this. Those are all things, but those are all things that can be taught. And that that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about editing Not Even Past is helping people. Well, I said this earlier, but it really has been incredibly gratifying to help people improve their writing and for me to improve my own writing by reading everyone else's.
And in the future, would you continue teaching public history at UT?
Yes, I think so. Though, now we have people teaching digital history too, so I have to think about how to do it differently. And what I really want to do is something collaborative with historians in the community and get the students to work on collaborative projects, to think about collaborative projects to improve our community. So to improve the history of Austin and the public's awareness of the history of Austin. And I think really some of the best public history is local history. I don't know, what do you think about this? You're all public historians. And I know, like Jimena, you work on a place far away, but it's still kind of a local study. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think it would be great because the projects I'm working on right now are collaborative. I'm sorry. Collaborative. They're mainly they're mainly that. They're mainly that. They're trying to be very inclusive, very participatory. We're talking about the participatory museum, but this has been some years ago. So I think that the way to do projects right now is just like that, like to co-create, to co-host, and to do things. And I think that's very interesting. And also you learn a lot. And it's also a lot of fun. It's more fun than to working alone also.
Yes, absolutely.
Just my opinion. I don't know what Guilherme and Marie think.
I'm currently not involved in such projects directly, but I don't know, maybe Guilherme has comments.
No, I'm not involved too directly in this projects. Also, I studied about it last year when I was still in college, but right now the world is kind of coming back or still learning to understand itself here, right? At least how to understand and how to do things during the pandemic, and we're still working on that.
I think also these digital platforms give more chance to do this kind of collaborative projects.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think that's also a good thing to start teaching if you have the chance to teach students or to just incorporate in the projects that you're having anyway. So back to the moderators, do you have any questions, any comments?
Well, before we finish, I would just like to ask Joan something that I liked when I entered the first time, Not Even Past, is the phrase, the past is never dead. It's not even past. And I would like to, it's kind of a cliche maybe to ask you this, but I would like to understand what's your thoughts about this, Joan, because I have a kind of a nerd reference here from Rorschach from Watchmen, that he says that nothing ever ends, and I remember that instantaneously when I saw the Not Even Past for the first time. So I don't know what this means to you. The past is never dead. What do you have any thoughts about it?
I think the main idea for me is that the past is still really important for us to understand. And that we're always reevaluating what we know about what happened in the past. There's always something new to learn. No book, no article is ever definitive. What we are revisionists by trade. So the main sense is to think about history as something that's really alive still, it's still lively, still matters, and is still always debatable. But the other sort of part of it is that it's really important for us to be aware of our past and to know what happened in the past and to be accountable to the past. accountable to the people who've been, whose lives have been curtailed in some way by the past. I think that is, the fact that history is not even past makes us more it should make us more responsible and more accountable, or at least be aware of those issues. So that's.
Yeah, I agree with that, because public history has this great way to, like you said, we're all making a revisionism of history all the time. But some people, and you can feel that in society, that do that in a bad way, or, try to transform it in a way that it really wasn't. I know that this is a very personal perspective that we have. Maybe I have one, maybe you have one. But I think public history is a great way to, confront it and show to the public and to non-academic audiences too, what was it, and what do people who really search for it and who really, research it, think about it. I guess this is a very important part of public history. And for not even past too.
Yeah, I agree.
Are any other questions from the public? Are any comments, any suggestions? I don't see any. If Marie or Guilherme want to add a final remark, this is your chance to do it.
I would just like to thank everyone involved. This has been a very interesting discussion, and thank you for being here, Professor Neuberger. Thank you, Guilherme. Thank you, Jimena, for organizing this, and I hope this becomes the solid tradition once a month for explorers going forward.
It's great. Thank you so much for having me, and for giving me a chance to talk about Not Even Past and 15-minute history, and hopefully, encourage people to do public history and to access it too. Thank you. And thank you for the great questions.
I would like to say thank you to Joan for being with us. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, to know more of your work. And before we go, just a quick question. Do you have, this video is going to reach, I believe, newcomers and new historians that are getting to new public history. Do you have any advice? We already talk about the future, but do you have any advice or anything you would like to say to people who are beginning in public history?
I think just to read as much as you can, participate as much as you can, and feel free to try to experiment with it, to try anything new. The stakes are low. It's just worth doing. So I just want to encourage everyone to think about projects and just give anything a try.
Thank you. I would like to thank the three of you for participating in this session of the Explorers. I also hope, like Mary, that this becomes a tradition every month. We have already confirmed guests until January, so I encourage everybody, please, that has a suggestion or that want to participate in this format, please reach out to me. We will make it work. I was pretty excited today to have Joan Neuberger here, because I'm a fan of her work and from Not Even Past, and I want to say here that I miss my alma mater very much. This was a session dear to my heart. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, as I said, get in touch with me. This video is going to be uploaded to Facebook and to the International Federation for Public History website if you want to just watch it again. And if you have any comments, as I said before, just reach out to us, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.